Hello, first graders. So we are back here, just the first grade here. This is just a lesson for you guys. We're going to be talking about empathy again. This is probably the last lesson we're going to do that's really focused on empathy. I'm sure I'm going to talk about it moving forward because empathy is very important, really paying attention to how the people around us are feeling instead of just our own feelings. So I will mention it again, but this is the last lesson that's probably going to really focus on empathy, okay? So hopefully you guys remember, empathy is when we are taking the time to figure out how the people around us are thinking and feeling. We're paying attention to someone else's feelings and not just paying attention to our own feelings. And it is a really good way to be a good friend. It's a way to be good with our grown-ups at home or at school. It's actually a good way to be a good student because we start thinking about things and understanding things from how somebody else is thinking and feeling. It can really help us make some really good choices. It's very easy during the course of a day, for grown-ups too, myself included, to get really focused on my own thoughts and feelings. And when I'm doing that, I'm not necessarily doing a really good job of helping the people around me. But when I stop and think about how other people are thinking and feeling and listening to their point of view, it helps us all get along a lot better. It helps me be a better counselor. It helps me with doing my work. It helps me helping you guys. So we always want to take a moment, whether we're 5, 6, 7 years old or whether we're grown-ups, to really take the time to think about how the people around us are feeling and show them that we care by our actions, okay? So we're going to read a story today called Jamaica's Blue Marker. So Jamaica's Blue Marker by Juanita Havill and illustrations by Anne Sibley O'Brien. And I really want you guys paying attention to the story about how the characters are treating each other. So it's mostly going to be about Jamaica and a little boy named Russell in her class. Pay attention to whether or not they're using empathy, where they're paying attention and caring about how the other person feels, or if they're mostly focused on themselves. And when they are using empathy and they're thinking about how the other person feels and trying to show the person that they care, how well do they get along? Versus when they're only really focused on their own feelings, how well are they getting along then? Okay, so we're going to read through this.
Jamaica closed her eyes and thought about her picture. Mrs. Worth always said to think first, then draw. So she's thinking about what she wants to draw. Jamaica opened her eyes and drew a tree on her big sheet of paper. Then she drew leaves falling off the tree and colored them yellow. Jamaica, Mrs. Worth said, could you please share your markers with Russell? He doesn't have any. He never has anything he needs, Jamaica thought. But she said, okay, even though she didn't want to share her markers with him. Russell brought his paper to Jamaica's table. He sat down beside her and grabbed her blue marker. Jamaica picked up her brown and orange markers to finish her picture. She didn't pay any attention to Russell. After a while, she peeked at his paper. Russell was making squiggly circles all over his page. We're supposed to draw a fall picture, Russell, Jamaica said. Who says? Mrs. Worth, don't you ever listen? I don't have to. Russell reached out with a blue marker and made a streak across Jamaica's picture. Russell, stop! Shouted Jamaica. But Russell scribbled all over Jamaica's yellow-leafed tree.
All right, so things are going pretty poorly right now. And let's just take a second now. Is Russell, as he's reaching over and scribbling all over Jamaica's picture, is he thinking about himself or is he thinking about how Jamaica's going to feel when he does that and showing her that he cares? He's focused on himself. He's upset and he wants to show Jamaica how upset he is, so he's going to try to ruin her picture. So he's focused on his own feelings and his own anger right now. What about Jamaica and the way she was talking to him? She was kind of frustrated with him, and that was coming across in the way she was talking to him. So was she thinking about herself then and her frustrations while working with Russell? Or was she thinking about how maybe Russell was feeling when doing that project and sharing markers and looks like he was having a little trouble? What do you think she was focused on? Russell and his feelings or her own feelings? She was kind of focused on her own feelings. If she was thinking about Russell, she might have been thinking, oh, like he's having a hard time with this. Maybe I can try to help him. But instead, she just kind of told him what to do. So neither of them are using empathy, and how are they getting along right now? They're not getting along well at all. They're fighting, so it's not going very well.
Mrs. Worth, Jamaica cried. Russell wrecked my picture. Mrs. Worth hurried over to their table. Russell, did you do this? She held up Jamaica's picture. Mrs. Worth couldn't get Russell to say, I'm sorry, so he had to go sit alone and work on spelling until art was over. So Jamaica's feeling pretty sad about that. How do you guys think Russell's feeling right now? Look what Russell did, Jamaica showed her father and brother when she got home. I tried, but I couldn't make another one as good as this. When she looked at the ugly blue squiggles, she had to swallow hard not to cry. Russell is mean. Did you tell Mrs. Worth what happened? Her father asked. Jamaica nodded. Russell can't use my markers again. I shared with him because he doesn't have any. He never has what he's supposed to have. But that's no reason to be mean. No, her father said. Russell shouldn't have messed up your pictures. The next time they had art, Jamaica was glad Russell didn't sit at her table. Then he couldn't bother her, and she didn't have to share her markers with him either. But at recess, Russell threw sand at her, and he chased 2 second-grade girls, so he had to go to the office. Before he came back, Mrs. Worth said, I would like to tell you something. Can you all keep a secret? Yes, Jamaica shouted with her classmates. We're going to have a going-away party for Russell on Friday. His father got a new job in another town. They will be moving over the weekend. I thought that you might like to make cards to say goodbye. Then Russell will have something to remember us by. Mrs. Worth passed out paper. Then she showed everyone how to fold the paper into a card. Jamaica didn't want to make a card for Russell. She was glad he was moving. Then he wouldn't bother her any more. She put the paper in her desk.
Jamaica, right now, it's time to make cards for Russell to say goodbye, which might make Russell feel good, and Jamaica's not going to do it. She doesn't want to make a card for Russell. Is she using empathy right now? No. She's thinking about herself and her feelings. And again, if I'm using empathy, I understand why she's upset. Russell's been pretty mean to her. But is she making a good choice right now? Do you think she's being a good friend? No. So she's not using empathy still. And we've learned a lot about Russell and why he might be upset, but he hasn't been using empathy either to think about how he's making the people around him feel. At supper, Jamaica said, I like living here. I like my house and my room and the tree in the front yard too. I like my school too. I'm glad you do, her mother said. I wouldn't like to move. Who said anything about moving? Ozzy said. Russell is moving, Jamaica said. Lucky you, he won't mess up your pictures anymore, Ozzy said. I wonder how Russell feels about moving, Dad said. He might be upset. Has he talked about it? Russell doesn't say anything. He just gets in trouble. So, again, real quick, just think about that, what her dad said. Has Russell talked about it? And Jamaica says, no, he doesn't say anything. It may be if someone went up and asked, if used empathy and said, hey, Russell, how are you feeling? Are you okay? You seem upset. Remember some of that empathetic listening. Seems like you might be feeling upset right now, Russell. Is everything okay? That maybe some people would have learned sooner that he was moving and they could have helped him with some of those feelings. Like maybe if he had some of you in his class who know about empathy, then maybe one of you would have gone up to Russell when he was being upset or doing some things and said, Russell, are you okay? It looks like you're upset. And you could have been there to help him. And that's why empathy is so powerful, because if you notice how the people around you are feeling and you start to think about their feelings, then you can go out and try to help them, and you can be the one that makes them feel a lot better about something, whether they're sad or angry or frustrated, or help them celebrate things that make them feel good. But no one's talking to Russell. That's what we just learned. So he doesn't have a lot of people using empathy to understand how he's feeling and to try to make him feel better. But listen how the story ends. Russell didn't come to the classroom on Friday morning. He was with his mother in the office. Jamaica looked at his empty desk. Next week, Russell would be gone. He wouldn't be at his desk ever again. She decided to make a card for Russell. She got out the blank card and her markers, too. But just then, Mrs. Worth said, Who are my helpers this week?
Jamaica raised her hand. Jamaica, could you collect the cards and put them in Russell's desk? Brianna and Thomas, I'd like for you to clear the activity table for plates and cups. Jamaica went from desk to desk to pick up the cards. She put the whole stack in Russell's desk. As she closed his desk, Russell came in with his mother. The party started. They played games for a while and ate cake. Love cake. Russell opened up his desk and took out all the cards. Look, Mom, everybody made a card for me. Not everybody, Jamaica thought. She took the blue marker out of her marker bag and then she ran up to Russell. This is for you, Russell. She handed him the marker. You can use it at your new school. So why do you think she picked the blue marker? Think about the story. What happened in the beginning? What do we know about Russell and that blue marker? But you might need it, he said. You like to draw. You draw the best pictures in the whole class. What if you have to color the sky? Someone will share with me. Thanks, he said. You're lucky you get to stay here. Now Jamaica knew how Russell felt about moving. I wish you didn't have to move, she said.
So she's thinking now, Russell is thinking about Jamaica and how she feels. He doesn't want to take the marker at first because he's worried about how she'll feel if she doesn't have it. And Jamaica's thinking about Russell and wanting to do something nice for him because she knows now that he's feeling nervous and anxious about moving. So they're both using empathy. How are they getting along right now that they're both using empathy? Yeah, they're getting along really well. In the beginning of the story, not so much. In the beginning of the story, they were only thinking about themselves and their own feelings and wound up with a big argument. At the end of the story, they're both using empathy, and now they're getting along really well.
When Jamaica waved goodbye to Russell, she noticed that his mother was carrying his goodbye cards. Russell held out the blue marker and waved it at her as if he'd won a prize. Goodbye, Russell. I'll miss you, Jamaica said. And she really meant it. The end, and there's her bag of markers without the blue one because she gave it away to Russell.
Okay, so that is Jamaica's blue marker. I hope you guys like that story. To me, it's a really powerful example of how using empathy can really help you understand what somebody else is going through and maybe be that really good friend that takes the time to help somebody feel better. The beginning of the story, Jamaica was not using empathy, and either was Russell. And we saw what happened, right? It led to some big arguments. And at the end of the story, even though Jamaica had every reason to still be frustrated and angry at Russell for some of his behavior, and maybe she still was, she stopped thinking about herself for a little while, thought a lot about Russell and how he must be feeling moving away from school, and so she went out of her way to do something nice for him with that blue marker. She used empathy to think about Russell's feelings and to try to do something nice for him. So that was a powerful example of the difference between how we might be getting along with someone when we're not using empathy and we're focused on ourselves, and how we might get along with somebody if we're using empathy and are paying attention to how they're feeling. But I want to say again, this is important. Even though we might be able to understand why Russell was upset, that doesn't mean that it was okay for Russell to act the way he was acting. It was okay for him to be upset, but it was not okay for him to be scribbling on Jamaica's paper or chasing the girls around the schoolyard or throwing sand at Jamaica. None of those things were okay. But if we can take a moment to try to guess and figure out why somebody might be acting that way, maybe we can do some things to try to make them feel better. So the next time you're at class or you're at home and you see somebody who's grouchy or grumpy or frustrated or sad, instead of maybe trying to avoid them or maybe thinking about ourselves and how we're feeling, take a moment and maybe try to figure out why they might be feeling that way. Go up and talk to them. See if you can figure out how they're feeling and why, and then maybe you can use that empathy that you're feeling to do something nice for them and try to make them feel better. Trust me, it's very powerful when somebody stops to ask how we're doing. If I'm having a bad day and someone says, Mr. Kramer, how are you feeling today? It makes me feel so much better just knowing that people care. And I'm sure the grown-ups at home, if you stop and think about, say, hey, how are you feeling today? It's going to make them feel really good. And that's why adults, we try to do that with you too. So try to use that empathy. Remember that our actions have an impact on how the people around us feel. If you are paying attention to how other people feel, you can really help people around you have a good day and feel good. If you're focused on yourself, sometimes you might do some things that maybe aren't so good for the people around us. I'm thinking about some boys and girls I know that, like, when it's time to do learning on the computer, they get angry and grouchy and get really upset at home. How do you think that makes your grown-ups feel? If we're using empathy, if you're being grouchy and yelling and whining, how is that making the adults in our life feel at home? And if we're going to use empathy, do we want to be grouchy and whiny and make people feel that way? Or can we maybe handle that frustration or that sadness or that nervousness? Can we do something different with it to keep ourselves calm, which is going to make the people around us feel better? So that's how we can use empathy. I really want you to think about, how is my behavior making other people feel, and noticing other people's behavior and trying to figure out, what can I do to make them feel better? All right, I know I talked for a long time today, so boys and girls, I'm going to ask you one question that I want you to answer for me, to send me a message. If you were in Jamaica and Russell's class, what would you have done to try to use empathy with Russell to show him that you care? So what could you have done to try to show Russell you care? There are no wrong answers. It's just about, what could you do for that caring act to let Russell know that you care about the fact that he was moving and you care about how he's feeling. So I hope to hear from a lot of you. I love getting those answers. I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.